What if the chains that bind you were invisible? What if the prison you live in has no walls, no guards, no locked doors, only the comforting illusion that you are free? The most dangerous weapon ever forged by those in power was never a sword, never a bomb, never an army. It was something far more insidious, your own ignorance. Think about this for a moment. Every empire that ever rose, every tyrant who ever ruled, every system of control that ever existed understood one fundamental truth. An informed population is a dangerous population. Knowledge is fire. And fire, when placed in the wrong hands, burns down palaces. So those who wished to maintain their thrones learned early that the greatest conquest is not over lands or resources, it is over minds. And the most efficient way to conquer a mind is not through force. It is through carefully cultivated darkness. The ancient rulers knew this. The Roman emperors perfected the art of bread and circuses. Keep the masses fed and entertained, and they will never look up long enough to see the strings attached to their limbs. The medieval church understood that a population that cannot read is a population that cannot question. For centuries, sacred texts were locked away in Latin, accessible only to the chosen few who could interpret divine will according to their own interests. The people were told what to believe, what to fear, what to hope for, and they obeyed, not because they were stupid, but because they were systematically denied the tools to think otherwise. This was not an accident. This was architecture, the deliberate construction of ignorance as a fortress around power. And here is what makes it so devastatingly effective. The prisoners themselves often become the most passionate defenders of their own cells. When you convince someone that their chains are actually wings, they will fight anyone who tries to set them free. But how did this weapon evolve? How did ignorance transform from a crude tool of ancient despots into the sophisticated instrument we see today? The answer lies in understanding that modern ignorance is not the absence of information. It is the abundance of noise. We live in an age where we have more access to knowledge than any generation in human history. Libraries of Alexandria fit in our pockets. Yet somehow we seem more confused, more divided, more easily manipulated than ever before. Why? Because the weapon evolved. Those who seek to control learned that in an information age you cannot simply hide the truth. Instead, you drown it. You flood the channels with so much contradicting data, so many competing narratives, so much emotional manipulation disguised as news, that the average person simply gives up trying to find solid ground. They retreat into comfortable tribes. They accept whatever story makes them feel righteous. They stop questioning, because questioning itself has become exhausting. This is manufactured confusion, and it is perhaps the most brilliant evolution of political ignorance ever devised. You no longer need to burn books when you can simply make people too overwhelmed to read them. You do not need to silence dissent when you can make every voice equally meaningless in a cacophony of noise. Have you ever felt this, that strange paralysis when you try to understand what is really happening in the world? That gnawing suspicion that you are being played, but you cannot quite see the game. If you have felt this, you are not paranoid. You are awake, and that awareness, uncomfortable as it is the first crack in the wall. Here is where it gets personal, because ignorance as a political weapon does not just operate on grand scales of nations and empires. It operates in your daily life, in the stories you tell yourself about why things are the way they are, in the beliefs you inherited without examination, in the fears that were planted in you before you were old enough to question them. Think about the narratives that shaped your worldview. Where did they come from? Who benefits from you believing them? These are not comfortable questions. They require you to sit with uncertainty, to admit that perhaps some of the foundations you built your identity upon were constructed by hands that did not have your best interests at heart. Consider how division is manufactured. How easily we are taught to hate those who are different, how political systems thrive not on unity but on conflict. If you are busy fighting your neighbor, you will never look up to see who is profiting from your battle. This is ancient wisdom weaponized for modern times. The Romans called it divide and conquer. Today we call it Tuesday. Every outrage cycle, every scandal that consumes public attention for exactly as long as it is useful, every crisis that appears and disappears according to invisible schedules, these are not random occurrences. They are managed, not necessarily by some shadowy cabal in a dark room, but by systems that have evolved to perpetuate themselves, by incentive structures that reward manipulation, by algorithms that have learned that anger keeps you scrolling. If this idea is resonating with you, if you feel that quiet recognition stirring in your chest, imagine what comes next. Subscribe now, because this journey is just beginning, and what we are about to uncover goes deeper than you might expect. So what do we do with this understanding? How do we disarm a weapon that has been refined over millennia? The answer begins with a profound shift in how we approach our own minds. First, we must accept that we are all susceptible. The greatest vulnerability to manipulation is the belief that you cannot be manipulated. The moment you think you are too smart, too educated, too aware to be fooled is precisely the moment you become most vulnerable. Humility is not weakness here. It is armor. Second, we must learn to sit with discomfort. The need for certainty is perhaps the greatest crack through which manipulation enters. When we cannot tolerate ambiguity, we grasp at whatever narrative offers solid ground, regardless of whether that ground is real. The truly wise learn to live in questions. They understand that not knowing is not failure, it is honesty. Third, and this is crucial, we must reclaim our attention. Your attention is the most valuable resource you possess. Entire industries exist to harvest it, to direct it, to convert it into profit and power. Every moment you spend in reactive consumption is a moment surrendered to agendas that are not your own. Conscious attention, deliberate, focused, self-directed awareness is an act of revolution. The ancient Stoics understood this. They taught that while we cannot control external events, we can control our responses to them. We can choose what we allow into our minds. We can cultivate discernment. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher-emperor, wrote that the soul becomes dyed the color of its thoughts. What colors are you allowing others to paint upon your consciousness? But there is a secret even deeper than this, and it is one that those who profit from ignorance desperately do not want you to discover. The ultimate antidote to weaponized ignorance is not merely acquiring more information. It is not winning arguments or having the right opinions. It is something far more radical. It is developing an unshakable relationship with your own inner knowing, that quiet voice beneath the noise, that clarity that emerges when you stop, when you breathe, when you return to the stillness at your center. Throughout history, every tradition that sought to liberate rather than control has pointed toward this same truth. The mystics, the sages, the genuine teachers, they all whispered the same secret: the kingdom is within. The truth you seek is not found in external authorities. It is found in the cultivation of your own awareness. When you know yourself, truly know yourself, you become immune to manipulation. Not because you have all the answers, but because you can no longer be convinced to betray your own perception in favor of someone else's agenda. This is why systems of control have always sought to disconnect you from this inner resource. Why they fill every moment with noise, with distraction, with urgency. Why silence itself has become something people fear. In stillness, you might hear yourself, and a person who can hear themselves cannot be easily led. Here is the revelation that connects everything we have discussed. Ignorance, as a political weapon, only works on those who have been separated from their own center. It only functions when people have been trained to seek truth externally, to wait for authorities to tell them what is real, to doubt their own perception more than they doubt the narratives they are fed. The moment you return to yourself, the moment you develop the courage to think independently, to question fearlessly, to stand in your own knowing even when it contradicts popular opinion. In that moment, the weapon loses its power over you. You step out of the prison that had no walls. You see the game that once played you, and here is what is beautiful about this liberation. It does not require you to have all the answers. It does not demand that you understand every conspiracy or decode every manipulation. It simply asks that you become ungovernable in the deepest sense, that you reclaim sovereignty over your own mind, that you refuse to outsource your thinking to those who profit from your confusion. This is not easy. It is, in fact, the work of a lifetime, but it is the most important work you will ever do, because when enough people wake up, when enough individuals reclaim their minds, the weapon of ignorance rusts and falls apart. It only functions through collective compliance, and compliance ends one awakened person at a time. So let me leave you with this. The greatest political act you can perform is not voting, not protesting, not arguing online. It is the radical cultivation of your own awareness. It is the daily practice of returning to your center. It is the courage to think for yourself in a world that profits from your confusion. You are not powerless. You never were. The ignorance they counted on was never truly yours. It was borrowed, and you can give it back. If this message spoke to something deep within you, take a moment to like this video and leave a comment sharing your own awakening. Subscribe to this channel because together we are building something powerful, a community of people who refuse to sleepwalk through their lives. And if you know someone who needs to hear this message, someone trapped in confusion, someone ready to wake up, share this with them. Sometimes a single video arriving at the right moment changes everything. The weapon is ancient, but so is the light that defeats it. And that light is already within you, waiting